Okay, Ray, we're recording. You can call us to order.
Okay. On behalf of our regular board chair, who's out this week, it's a pleasure to be your host, Ray Manahan. I call this meeting of our March Equity Board to order at 6:06 p.m. March 5th. I don't surprised that the folks from Baha'i aren't here. They're so good about it. But Dale told me that we have no public comments to go through, so we can jump over that part.
Ray, I will briefly tell you who's in attendance and not in attendance this evening. So we have a few excused absences this evening. That's our slim numbers. Our chair, Priti Modipan, has an excused absence out of town for work. Leslie Millender Irwin has an excused absence at the high school orientation for her 8th grader who will be starting high school next year. And then we also have an excused absence for Tony, who has stepped away from the board. I did not hear from Shay, so she might join us, but is currently unexcused. And Kunal, it will be late today, but he will be joining us here in the next 15 minutes or so. So it's en route. Yeah, Dad was stuck in traffic. So, one car household situation, but we'll be here shortly. But we do have quorum.
Okay, I think the next item is just to review the minutes from February 5th. If you could just take a minute to look at those, and I'm going to ask for approval from two of you. Can I get a motion to approve from anyone?
Motion to approve.
A second? Thank you, Karthik. Okay, minutes from March or February are approved.
First, Greg, ask if anyone has any discussion or changes.
Does anybody have any discussion on changes? No. Okay.
And they are unanimous.
Thank you. All right, we have this wonderful tradition here that Bridget started for all of us, is to ground ourselves and for her to ask us a question. And I have a really good one I wanted to ask. I think my answer to this might mimic yours, but I wanted to know for all of us in this room, if you do live in this city, I think all of us do, or at least close to it. What is your favorite part of living in the Issaquah city or in the Issaquah community? Just think about your daily lives. What is it about this? Try to be as specific as you can. And I'm going to start just to kind of get the vibe. I absolutely love the parks in the city. To be able to take my dog for a walk, there's so many options to do that. It's just a way for me to tune out and to just really think about things that are important in my life. Get away from that laptop for a few minutes in the middle of the day, and just block off an hour. And I always have options to choose from, whether it be Sammamish River Trail or up at Cougar Mountain or Lakemont Park up there at the top, which is beautiful and the sun is shining. So I'm just going to go around the room here and ask my fellow attendees what their favorite part of living in the Issaquah community is. Can I start with you?
Sure. I live in Sammamish, but I guess my favorite part is it's kind of like secluded. Like it's like 10 minutes to like your nearest grocery store, but it's super pretty because it's surrounded by a lot of trees and like there's hills where when it's snowing, like a lot of the kids like go sledding. It's like a really like nice community where I live. So that's I think my favorite part.
It's nice. Karthik?
I think my favorite part is that we share the city with bears. In the first 6 weeks of living in Issaquah, my wife and I saw 6 bears.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It was insane. Yeah. 2 on the Issaquah
Wow.
And no one is keeping account there, right?
There's a mama bear and 3 cubs right behind the Issaquah High School trail on the way to Pooper Point. And then 2 more on the Pooper Point trail a few weeks later. So
Wow.
that's like the
I think that might
milestone
be a
I'm
record.
setting for my life.
And Dale, I don't know, I know you don't live in our,
I don't, but I spend a lot of time here.
I know.
Most of my waking hours are here. One of the greatest, I feel like we're just like loving on the parks right now. I feel like one of the greatest assets in this community is our trail system. And one of the things that I enjoy so much, and I had like great experience today, is walking along Rainier Trail. And I was out there for my walk. I ran into this woman who was out walking her dog. And we just had like the most delightful afternoon conversation, just walking along the trail together. Didn't get her name, but just chatted about the weather and the sunshine. And she was bemoaning her that she's still finding it quite chilly. So I think just the public trail infrastructure that allows people to make connections here is really really special and really, I think, unrivaled in our area.
kudos to the people ahead of us who really made that foundation of the city, right, these trails. Marna?
Before I start, I'm going to comment on Karthik's comment. I used to teach science at Issaquah Middle School, and I actually did a unit in the spring on wildlife or carnivores in the backyard, where we gave out some of our kids whose parents agreed a camera to put in their backyard so that we could record bears, coyotes, raccoons in the backyard. And then accumulation of the trip was to go to the zoo, because it was in collaboration with the Point Defiance Zoo. But I was always shocked because I had access to see some of the camera footage of bears in my kids' backyards. And they'd say, yeah, Ms. Gilmore, this is normal for us. So I knew I'd seen bears downtown, but the number of bears they have in Cougar, because was my Cougar Ridge kids coming down, was quite impressive. So I feel it's nice. My favorite part about living in Issaquah is that Issaquah to me is a true community. I have been now living in Issaquah for 25 years, and when I go out, I always see people I know. I love that. It feels like one of those Hallmark movies where you go out and you run into people like chit chat. You can't go to Starbucks or Fred Meyer's or Safeway without seeing at least 2 or 3 people. I ran into Karthik and his wife when I went to Indian food, and I ran into my bank manager when I went to that restaurant. And I love that because it feels like true community.
Yes.
And that's something I appreciate, and I hope that never goes away. And I always tell people that living in Issaquah is living in, actually it's kind of a big city, but has this very small city feel.
Same for all as you. The parks are fabulous. I live in downtown Issaquah. I've lived here for almost 6 years and moved downsized into a very small house. And somebody said, who came and visited me, she said, your living room is actually all of downtown. And she was absolutely right. Right. So we go to the senior center. My husband's there quite a bit. I do the line dancing there sometimes, and that's right around the corner from us. We go to the library regularly. We have drinks on Tuesdays with friends at either Vino Bella or at the big picture, so there's like my life, I walk here, right? My life revolves around Issaquah. And like you, as I've been more integrated into it, I'm more and more recognized. I mean, I used to live in Sammamish, so I know the Sammamish people who come down, but I'm also meeting, having more and more people that I recognize here, which is just fabulous, right? Yeah, it's a great community.
Johnny?
Well, most of everything has been said. I love that, it's a small city, but still has all the facilities of a big city. The charm is there. And then just so beautiful. I mean, the views are amazing. We're surrounded by hills, and I dropped my kid to Issaquah High School, and stunning views absolutely from there. But my most favorite place is the Central Park, and there's a little viewpoint over there that you kind of look down at, you can get a really big, nice view of the city. And I believe it still falls under Issaquah, not Sammamish. So yeah, Central Park, that viewpoint is something we always take our guests there, or we go when I drop my son for soccer or something. That's where I'll walk and, see that.
Jeff and Amy, would welcome your, I don't know if you live here, but I know you work here.
I don't. I work here a lot, obviously. Hi, everyone. Jeff Watling, Parks and Community Services Director. Great to hear all the public spaces comments. You're absolutely right. It's a special, special place that way. I think for me, honestly, I've worked here a little over 8 years now. I'd say it's the people. It's a community of very intentional, thoughtful people who love the area they live in, and you can tell, right? And I think to your comment earlier, spot on. Public spaces like this don't just happen. It's generations of investments, and there's more investments to do. And I love to hear trails and parks. One little fun plug. We just did a lot of community engagement last year. We updated the park system plan, just sort of the vision for the park system. Hey, how do we take this great thing and continue to build upon it? And one of the real core visions is rebranding the park system as Issaquah's Creeks to Peaks Park System, with this idea of we really have an opportunity to connect every park. It's very rare that a city can sort of create one system that feels unbelievably connected. In town, whether you live downtown or as we head up into the public lands that surround us. So Creeks to Peaks.
Hi, I'm Amy Dukes. I'm the arts manager for the city, and I actually do live here. I've lived here for 17 years, which I cannot believe, because I have lived all over the country in 15 different states. And once my husband and I moved to Issaquah, we're like, yeah, we think we found it. And when I first moved here, I read a list, it's quite old now, but there were treasures of Issaquah that were created by the community. And it was like this list of, I think, 25 or 30 things that made Issaquah special. And I remember reading it and not fully understanding all of them, but one of them was the mist over the mountains, the entire mountain. And I remember the first time I really experienced that. I'm like, oh, that's what they meant. Yeah. Because it's, you probably know this at some times.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. So I love living here for all the reasons that you guys give it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Gail, can we move to number 5?
We can move to number 5.
Staff report, updates from you?
Staff report, updates from me. So as you all know, but I'll never get tired of saying the purpose of this. We started this last year, having each meeting a brief report out from the staff liaison on what's happened since our last meeting and the feedback that you provided to the administration. So I've got a couple things for today based on our February meeting. Number one is the Evans Consulting Group came to present at our previous meeting. They have begun their staff and board and commission member interviews. Thank you to Kelly and to Preeti, who have volunteered to represent the equity board in this effort. However, they're also looking for more interviewees. So Preeti and Kelly will be supporting specifically like in the equity, helping them take the equity lens to the work. But they're interviewing members of all of our boards and commissions about your experience as a board and commission member, the orientation and onboarding you got. And although it will be a little different for this board, the way discussions of equity show up in that work. So if you are interested in being interviewed by them to support the work that they're doing, please let me know before we leave today, because I know that they would love more input. Also, discussed at our last meeting, as part of the conversation with Mayor Polly about the work plan, were 2 different items. The equity, what we were referring to as the DEIB glossary. The equity team discussed the implementation of that glossary. And as part of that discussion over the course of the last month, they also decided they wanted to change the name of it to the Equity and Inclusion Glossary. This is a name change, moving away from an acronym, which can often be misconstrued or Misvillainized, that was the word I was gonna look for, but I was gonna go with a different word, but that's what I wanted to say. Moving away from an acronym to actually saying the words themselves. So for brevity's sake, went with equity and inclusion glossary, just not to have a forward title for a glossary, but wanted to relay that to you all that as part of the implementation plan, they changed the name. Additionally, the equity team added the evolution of the framework, which we also discussed in January, to their work plan for 2025, which hadn't been on the work plan previously, based on the feedback that you all have already provided. I don't yet have an update on what's happened with resilience hubs or the progress on that from the feedback that you all gave. Unfortunately, David Reedy, fortunately, David Reedy is on vacation this week. So when I went to check in with him, I got an out of office message. But I'll make sure to loop back as I have updates from them based on the feedback that you all gave last month. And that it concludes my brief staff report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anyone? Okay, I think we're clear to move to number 6. Is that okay?
We are indeed.
Jeff and Amy, you want to come join us?
Yeah.
Welcome you all to the table.
It's warmer on this side of that.
That's fair enough. Jeff, I'm just bringing up the presentation. And I always, despite having done this a dozen times, I always forget how to get to present. There we go.
Cool. Want me to kick it off?
Go for it.
All right, great. Well, hi, everyone, again. Thank you for having us. Excited to have this conversation with you this evening around cultural events. Why don't we go to the next slide? So the purpose is to share with all of you it's work we've been doing on the department as well as administration level on a proposed new approach for supporting cultural events. As you'll hear in the background, and those of you that were here in the formation of the equity board, Kelly, I know you were, this was some early conversations, and it feels like we're proposing to head to a direction that was the desired destination really from the get-go. So really requesting just your thoughts on that approach, feedback on this proposed plan, and helping us starting to think through challenges as we really start to do some forming work with a grant program. Next slide. This will come towards the end as well. I won't go through all of these questions, but again, some questions that we'll go through after the staff report and presentation in terms of just your reaction, how we can make sure we're communicating, if we're doing a grant program moving forward, how we can get that news out, etc. Next slide. I will jump into some background here, and then Amy is here as our grants expert on the art side to talk through some of the elements of the grant, and then hand it over to Dale to wrap it up. So in terms of background, this is when we worked with the Human Services Commission, I'll back up, in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, we as a city really felt it was important to begin exploring the formation of an equity board. You may recall myself, Monica Negrilla, some Human Services Commission members hosted a bunch of community conversations at the time. And even in those community conversations about equity and about cultures and what that really means and looks like here in Issaquah, this idea of cultural events was really discussed a number of times there. And how can the city help to foster them, to promote them, to really encourage them to happen? Moving forward in 21 and 22, the city for a couple of years had been doing what was called Welcoming Week. That first week in early September as sort of going back to school, seeing a lot of success with that. At that time, staff and the equity board identified 5 key cultural celebrations that we wanted to do more around. Again, Kelly, you may recall these, but how do we take Black History Month, the Lunar New Year, Pride Month, Juneteenth, and Welcoming Week, and do some educational seminars around them, community events or cultural events around those key celebrations, key months. That work really helped to foster, I think, some great events, but it became clear, I think, as we did them and have been doing them the last couple of years, the city's role shouldn't necessarily be the producer of these. We wanted them to really begin to feel more community driven by those in these cultural communities. We also began to ask ourselves, why these 5, right? Why should we as the city be the ones deciding which ones are done? Let's really give opportunity for the community to identify that. Coupled, and again, knowing ultimately the goal all along was, how do we as a city and an equity board and how do we position ourselves to really be a supporter of community-based cultural events? You may be familiar, or Dale may have updated you through last year. We had a pretty significant, very hard budget process last fall as the 2025 and 2026 budget was created. Parks and Community Services Department lost some key staff and some key resources that have really forced us to look at 25, 26 a little bit differently. We are finding ways to continue to where we've had some of these events. I think Black History Month I'll use as an example. We hosted a art exhibit at the community center last year with Onyx Art Group out of Seattle. It was a fantastic event. We weren't able to do that to that scale this year, but we didn't want it to go away. And so we worked with Anne and the great folks at Onyx, put them in touch with Issaquah Highlands and Lindsay up there. That event is still happening. It's being hosted at Blakely Hall. We're planning to do that with really all these events in this year to make sure they don't just go away. But that's not necessarily sustainable either. And so what we are really seeking tonight is some feedback on what we really think is a natural transition that we should go to as a city. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll introduce this and then hand it over to Amy. We, rather than being the direct operator of these events, we want to position ourselves and think it's really timely that we become a funder, a space provider, and a supporter of community events. So we think we can do that by creating a grant program where we would be able to provide some seed funding with that grant. Also really encourage the activation of our parks or our community spaces to have those events happen and certainly be as a city in a position to promote those events. So we don't have a grant program formed right now, but we really think that it's an opportunity for us to create this. We're in the grant business in arts. We're in the grant business in human services. We've got some great boards and commissions who do great work already reviewing grants. This feels like this could be another opportunity to do something like that. So, Amy, if you want to jump in a little further and
Sure. I'll just build off of what Jeff said. So again, we're hoping to have a conversation tonight with you all about kind of transitioning to the city, not producing these events or, being the sole reason they happen, but to really support the community and the events that the community wants to put on. We already are a funder of some of these events. The Arts Commission does an annual grant making program. And the Human Services does a biannual every 2 years grant making program and does support some of these events this way, especially the Arts Commission. So for instance, just this year, we're supporting Day of the Dead as an event. And in the past, we've supported Lunar New Year, we've supported Holi, we've supported many celebrations. But we want this to be it's sort of like the groups that are in the know come to the Arts Commission and ask for grants, but we try to get our program out and our grant information as wide as we can, but we know it's not reaching everyone, and it's maybe not so equitable that some of them know about it and their event gets funded and others. And so anyhow, the proposal that we are hoping to discuss with you is that the city would create a real grant making process around cultural celebrations. I know when we open up our grant making process for arts and culture, I do get calls from groups that are like, does this even count? Is this eligible? And because the Arts Commission has sort of very open-ended guidelines, we're like, sure. But again, we would like to make a much more intentional grant making program and process. And that there is precedent for having a subcommittee to make decisions about grants in the city. We many years ago had a grant making program called the Community Fund that supported community nonprofits to do projects and programs to help make them more sustainable and build their capacity. And that was kind of administered by a group of board and commission members from many of the boards and commissions together. So we know it can be done, and we're hoping that we could create something similar. And just for the sake of example, you know, maybe some members from the Equity Board, the Arts Commission, the Human Services Commission could all work together to evaluate grants. As a space provider, this is definitely an issue that we hear from our community groups. They have an idea, maybe they don't even need funding, but they don't have anywhere to put the thing on. And we know in Issaquah, we actually have a space problem for large gatherings when especially when it's not summer. It's hard to find indoor spaces. So the city has some nice indoor spaces. The community center, the senior center is an excellent space. And with all the capital improvements that are happening right in front there, it's going to be even better. And then outdoor space. So we do, I think, currently get quite a few requests for groups to use our parks, to use the green out here at the community center. And again, I think the intention of this is to be much more open and clear about, hey, you can ask us to use these things. And we have a process to help, you know, decide how to provide that support to you. And then as a supporter, not from a financial standpoint, but just to help amplify the message. A lot of groups, especially more grassroots groups, really ask for our help to get the word out about their events. The city has lots of well-developed mechanisms for communicating to the community. So communication is one way we can be supportive. We have event planning professionals in our staff if there's help that's needed. And then also connecting to other resources and organizations. I think most of us that work in this space kind of have a macro view of the community and the nonprofits and the cultural groups. And so we might be able to also connect, you know, like-minded groups together to help enhance the events. So I think there's something that we can provide, but we'd like to do it in a much more clear, intentional way. And currently it's kind of like, if you ask, but people don't know to ask. And so that's not quite fair. Yeah.
Okay, a couple more slides and we'll pause for questions. We think there are some, and if you read the staff report, it outlined what I'm about to say, but we think there are some clear benefits to this approach. And so, you know, we've got two folks within our Parks and Community Services here, but I represent the executive that also thinks this is the direction we're hopefully headed in. We think the benefits, there's some increased authenticity and representation within events that are led by community members versus just staffed by city staff members who potentially don't have any ties to those cultural events themselves. It also, I think, a benefit is just getting the city out of the way of how those events feel, how they are designed, the structure of them. And Jeff referenced this earlier, but by getting the city out of determining, you know, what are the 5 events potentially will allow the cultural events that are funded to more quickly adapt to the changing, growing, diversifying community that we live in. We also think there's some potential here to build some enhanced community ownership. If some of our events, there's a lot of community ownership around them. But we've struggled with a few events where it's hard to find anyone from the community that wants to, especially from a list that we predetermined 5 years ago now, almost. It also removes the city from being sort of the decider about what an event looks like or feels like. And then this other benefit, I mean, just a sustainable model. Right now, one, I would say from what this predates me, this conversation, but from what I have heard, the intention was always for it to be community led. And it drifted to being more city led. And currently that's not a model that is sustainable for the city. And it would likely mean fewer and fewer events or diminished quality of events in the upcoming years, just given staffing. Grant making, we think, is going to allow for cultural events programming to continue and potentially expand. So potentially organizations that might just need a little seed funding to do an event, being able to provide them that, whereas they might not be able to if we're just saying, sure, come and be part of this event we've determined, but we have no financial ability to support you in that. However, we also know there are some challenges and some considerations that we're already, as an administration, thinking about. One that I don't want to leave off, but Amy just referenced, is the sort of equity around recruitment. Yeah. There are some people and some organizations that are very well aware of our funding streams. They know the date. They are familiar with the website. They've probably applied a dozen times. They know what needs to. They know the members of the Arts Commission and the Human Services Commission. We know that even by trying to sort of decenter the city, recruitment it doesn't go away as a problem. If we've struggled right now to recruit organizations to come and co-lead the events we've predetermined, it doesn't disappear as a challenge when we say, hey, we've got some money for you. It actually just, it's the same problem, but it's different. And so we'll need the equity board and other members of the community to help publicize and recruit within networks or help us figure out the most effective way, the most equitable way to recruit. Grant making process and cadence. What makes sense? How do we ensure? Amy referred to, Arts Commission has an annual process. Human Services does theirs every other year. How do we ensure a process that is responsive and sustainable? So, wouldn't it be lovely if we could sustain making a grant every month for the next month? That's not going to be a sustainable process, but what would be something that's reasonable but also responsive to how orgs might be thinking about, or how community members might be thinking about an upcoming cultural event. Eligibility criteria. Maybe we do. Maybe there are some opinions about cultural events that should be given some sort of preference. Is there other eligibility that we want to consider in this grant making process? I know the arts grant process, you have very clear criteria, and those have been developed over time. What can we learn from other grant making processes that might aid in some both clarity for those applying, but also allow decisions to be made transparently. And then little questions like, can you be eligible and awarded both an arts grant and a cultural event grant? Is that okay? Can you get it for the same event? Do they have to be different events? You could see the list as it goes through my brain. And then I think one of the biggest challenges, I'm spending a good amount of my time this year working on a city priority around social connection. And one of the things that we know promotes social connection is the recurrence of events, that having an expected recurring event is a really powerful way to keep people connected and keep people tied into the community. And we know that a grant process could eliminate that we could, some years we could have a group or an individual or an organization that's really passionate and excited about an event. And they apply and they get the funding. And then some years, maybe they don't have the capacity. They don't reach out for the funding and that event doesn't happen that year. And so we already know that could be a situation, and that's in tension potentially with some of what we know creates some of the connection we talked about during our opening question today. So those are some considerations and some concerns that we're already thinking about that we thought were good to air for this group, so that you might have some thoughts on each of these. And I just want to share the timing and next steps before we talk through the questions that Jeff introduced at the top. This is the first conversation I don't know, we haven't talked, the three of us have talked about it. We've certainly talked about it internally, as the administration, but you are the first, board or commission to be consulted about this. And so we're gonna start talking to boards and commissions, to our community organizations, and getting some initial feedback, but this is the first one. The plan is to do that here in Q1 and Q2 of this year, and then to work on creating a budget plan and proposal for how much money we want to set aside for this, and a proposed program structure. So being able to answer some of the questions around grant making that I've already floated out here on the table to you today. And then come back to this board and the other folks that we'll talk to later in this year or early in 2026, for further input on a more fleshed out program. So that's a little bit about where we're at. So just so you know, we're at the very nascent. I feel like I'm always saying nascent stage to this group, but this is the nascent stage of this project. And there are some specific questions we're eager to get this group's thoughts on, though if you have other reactions outside of these questions, that would be fine. But what's your reaction to this proposed funder, space provider, supporter role? How can the administration bolster its applicant recruitment process? So thinking about like what can we do to make sure that people hear about this, that different groups and pockets of our community hear about this. What are the key characteristics of the grant making process or cadence that you might think we should consider to center equity and ensure accessibility, while also, as I referenced, managing for a staff capacity? We can't, do a grant process every single month for the next month. And how should the administration communicate if and when events do not occur to the lack of community interest or community capacity potentially to even lead an event? So those are some of the things that are on top for the three of us as we've been starting to talk about this, but would be open to additional thoughts as well. And so, Ray, I'll turn it back over to you to manage conversation here.
Yeah, I'd love to kickstart this. Thank you for this. This is really exciting. And I want to dissect this a little bit because, Dale, if you could go back a few slides to the first arrow one with the 5 events. Can I ask how were we part of deciding that those were the 5 areas of focus for cultural events? How did we land there?
I don't remember that.
I don't remember either. So, and the reason that I asked that is we were, I can tell you with the Pride Month, I was so heavily involved with it that it was like, ooh, that's a great equity topic. And how is it that the equity board could get involved? And it was, I'll tell you exactly what I did is I just started, like you said, it's all about connections and who you know. So immediately I thought, if we're going to have an opportunity to educate our community, who do they want to hear from? I reached out to Kaylee H. She was willing to get on board and say, let's do something together. And then the school, I reached out, I'm forgetting her name. She leads the Saga group, Shannon
Anderson.
Yes. So I got this panel together to come to the garage and have this opportunity to have this occur at Pride Month so we can just educate our community. We just have a lot of question and answers, but again, to build your connections on who you know. So I think running through the different commissions and starting with us is a great way to say, do these even resonate with you? Do we need to do some analysis on and reach out to our communities and say, is this what you'd like us to focus on? Are there other ones that we're missing? I thought Welcoming Week and Cultural Fest, just because of the scope and size of it here happening at the park, was wonderful because it brought people together. The Pride Month, year 1, I think it was all online, and year 2, we had it at the garage. But there's so much opportunity to grow there. But I guess I would have to go back to my original question. How did we land with these 5 things, and should we stick with them or should we broaden them and look for other opportunities? And one thing is just the demographics of our city. Maybe there's an understanding of who resides here that an event would resonate with the biggest population.
Totally agree. And yeah, and forgive me, I don't recall the specific origin of those 5. I know it was predominantly a conversation with administration, and I think there was some demographic decision around it. Again, sorry, Dale, I probably didn't prove this. There were some other, the 5 were, because there was Asian American, Pacific Islander, I'm not gonna get the initials right.
AAPI.
AAPI month was identified. Hispanic Heritage Month was another one. So they were really just based on city demographics, sort of city decisions. To I think your bigger question of are these where we are going to remain? No, absolutely not. I think that's the purpose of this conversation, is to say we don't necessarily think the city should be the one identifying what events, right? Thankfully, there's a good history with some of these, and we would want those to continue, right? Some great work with the Circle, and as I mentioned before, the Onyx Art Group. But we would want to see this list expanded or feel much more inclusive, or not even really a list per se, right?
I have a question, and comment. So I work in the school district, and one of the things I have is something called a family advisory. And I make I work hard to ensure that that group is representative of the diversity in our school district. But work hard to make sure that it is, like, I have family with Indian, Middle Eastern, Eastern European, Western European, all, and also include a lot of the religions. And looked at one point for different languages also within that group. And I'm wondering, that has worked well for me, because then I can make sure that I'm getting many perspectives. And so I'm working with David Reddy for the sustainability group. I have tapped into that group to help me disseminate information when David was sharing information with me regarding the bomb site. So I had talked to David about the same idea of really having this diverse group be in his back pockets when things were happening. We could tap into them, and I think this would be a great way to even start that group rather than just for that. Because I'm wondering if there's availability or capacity for staff in the city to create a community advisory group composed of people that represent different or like groups, and then tapping into them for the events. Because I did go to the Holy event at Lake Sammamish State Park, and I have been very sad not to have one. I know that Diwali and holy celebrations happen, but they're not, everyone's not invited, or supposedly they are, but I didn't know about them. So how do I know about it more broadly? But you're telling me that you have venues, and I know, for example, that the Indian community is very tight, and they would be happy to do a lot of these events if they had known, but I don't know if they know. Same thing with the Chinese community. I've had a Chinese community come to me and ask to hold events, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but this is not gonna work in our world, and because, I'm sorry, but the administration building, nobody has access to it on weekends and in the evenings. That is not the place to do something. And I pushed them to go and talk to the community center, but I don't know if it happened, but I think at Blakely Hall, that would have been, so I don't know what happened with that, but I can help connect that. Those groups who are part of your advisory groups, they could do that, and then we have, when we've done culture fairs at the different schools, the different cultures that represent different individuals in that school that represent that culture are amazing in coming together to create something to present for the cultural fair. So I'm wondering if we had, and there is a network, right? Like there's like a Korean community conversation, there's a Chinese community conversations. Have we all tapped into those communities? Because if they knew and if they were communicating, and so if we had some people like that in our advisory group, because we have this huge Indian community that really prefers WhatsApp, right? And so how do we pull them in to now come represent, talk about, because to me, the biggest thing about doing any cultural events is authenticity. And if it's not authentic, people see it and it's like, no, thank you, not gonna go. And so sometimes I know that I've heard complaints about an event that happened where it was not authentic, and there was a lot of pushback and frustration about that event. And so for me, I love the idea that you're going to do it by one, not having a list that we're not quite sure how it came up,
Yes,
but
right.
having a group of people that were deliberately invited to come, and it's an open place where more people can be invited if they see themselves
Mhm.
not being represented, to have meetings. And even if you do it like every 3 or 4 months, so that we're not overtaxing ourselves, and they can talk about, because a lot of things people just don't know, like what are some of my options for locations? How much is it gonna cost? So all of that was provided, if that was a conversation they had, but I think it starts, is my belief. I don't know how much we can give you input for that. I always have opinions, so don't ask me for that. you know. But I think I should stop talking and say my biggest suggestion to you is creating a community advisory, cultural advisory board for the community that is interested in partnering together. And it's not that they, the people over there, but maybe for different events, one of them can take leadership in the communication and like do something, because people just don't know. That's the one thing I find.
You have eloquently spoken to the challenge and why we're in this place where we really want to birth a new approach and birth a more equitable and community focused approach to supporting cultural events. You're spot on.
Because I think one of the things I talked to Dale about at one point was, or maybe Monica, who knows? Just making some of the events we do in the city, and we've talked about it, more diverse. Like, how do we make Salmon Days more diverse? How do we make concerts in the green more diverse? I love Welcome Week, and it's a little bit skewed, lots of Indian people presenting, love them. But how do I also make sure that we have some other communities presenting? And I recognize it's also Hannah doing all the work, and so how do we help her? Because it shouldn't be her, right? It should be a team of people doing that. And then for Juneteenth, it always feels like it's a last minute Tony and Shay being pulled in to organize something. And it also bothers me sometimes that we only celebrate Black History and Black History Month on Juneteenth. Can we just do something like a Black culture rap band, some musician coming in, not during those 2 times? And maybe.
But again, not something that we as a city want to try. And
No, no, but someone in that group.
Let the community.
Yes, the community advisory group say, hey, we have an opportunity to include this person. And that will really pull people in, because it's not just authenticity, but it's inclusivity. Because that holy event that happened at Lake Sammamish State Park was everybody in Issaquah. The mayor came, it was very exciting. I loved it. And it went back to my old days of throwing color at people. So of course I had fun. But I wanted that. I love looking around and going, oh my gosh, this is not just Indian people here. It's a lot of Asian, white people, different people there. So it's, and maybe one of the because you're gonna have to have parameters, right? And one of the parameters will be, it's not a venue for you to have your cultural celebration on city pay or grant, but one of the parameters would be, how is this going to be inclusive of community and some have some kind of this. I'm a teacher also, so I'm always like, how do I do a little bit of teaching or information giving?
Yes.
Yeah,
sharing?
and
exchange,
right?
This grant program is about hosting cultural events that are open to the public. They can come, experience, learn, celebrate. Yeah. And hopefully there is a holy celebration at Confluence Park.
Ooh. Oh, there is coming up?
There's been inquiries
Like
recently,
in the next
this
2
last, yes, in the next 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
we are,
Oh my gosh, that's gonna be chaos. I have to put that on my calendar. I love it.
so stay tuned. Not put on by the city, put on by a community group that
The 14th.
we are hoping to be a space provider.
Very nice.
Yes.
Kelly, you had something?
You have probably mapped what cultural groups are in the school system, and therefore you're trying to pull probably people who are more active leader-like people into your parent advisory group, because then they can communicate back, right? Has the city mapped that? Yeah.
No.
And how could you help them map it? Is that possible? Because that's what's missing, is knowing who's here and then who to start talking to.
And then how to not exhaust those
Yeah.
brokers. 'Cause I think
Definitely
that's
don't
what
take
we're-
mine.
No, and yes.
Yeah.
And I would say maybe,
Yeah.
and again,
And
yeah,
but I think, I truly think that's possible because you just need demographics. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
you need to tap into social media because there are many social media outlets where you can put some information in. And honestly, huge part of it is authenticity in building that relationship.
Yeah.
Because you send out this in social media, everyone's gonna be like, what the heck is this? And instead you have to go out there
Yeah.
and talk to and have a conversation. Why?
Yeah.
Because for me, that is literally my job. So I had literally part of my job is to talk to a lot of different parents. And so then I was able to build a relationship with them and say, hey, do you want to join?
Yes.
And then that's how it happened. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you don't have as much capacity, and I'm gonna say, I don't know if all of us can volunteer for that much, and I don't know how to do that, but that's how I did it.
And that's why I wonder if this is possible. In all honesty, given it's a wonderful idea, and I don't like to be the naysayer, but as is, even with best intentions, it will be those who know who will do. And everyone else will
when
be.
you say this, Kelly, you're
I'm
referring to a
talking about
grant
this.
program.
Yeah, that the
So it's
opportunity
okay.
would be, for those who are in the know. Right, as it always is.
Shani, you have a question? I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I was from the past experience in a similar thing. I think what the city did. This is I'm talking about Alabama. So what the city did was basically invited the local nonprofits. And any sort of leaders or individuals send out an open invite for an evening of snacks and tea, and from there the alliance started forming, and some people stayed, some left, but eventually it was an alliance of 67 people that emerged from that kind of first gathering, and then the word kind of passing around through the channels that in each community has. But it took time. It took time and effort to because there's many challenges in that as well.
Yeah.
And I think, Kelly, that it is work, it'll take time, but I think it's possible because you already have the circle that you're already giving money
Yep.
to.
Yep.
And the circle is not just about Hispanics. Alicia has a lot of Russian groups, Chinese groups,
Yep.
Indian groups, so she already has connections and already getting funding. So I think if you tap in some of the
Yep.
groups that already exist, so I'm not saying that I don't want the families that I can't keep them for myself. But I'm going to say that I can ask, and I can ask them to share the word, to recruit other parents and just hear. Because some of them might be, I have a lot of families who don't participate because their kids no longer go to our school, but they're interested in doing community work, but they can't. A lot of parents with young kids who kind of want to, or just all over the spectrum. And I'm only capturing K-12, but I know that they know that other people. So I think they exist. It's just going to take some effort to begin with to start that. And we might not capture everything. And I'm going to tell you, my group from when I started it 7 years ago, 8 years ago, not I started, actually, the district started now, 10 years. There's going to be 90% different people. That's when it started. And so it's always going to change. But I think they share the word. And then when they come, they're like, wow. And so to me, that's literally the job of this equity group because it helps the voice of the community come in and bringing it in. And then they tell other people, because we actually had both. We had a family advisory group and an equity group. And so we're still an equity group, and then there would be a family advisory group that some of us might be attending part of and supporting. I mean, if that's the direction.
I want to throw a question at you, and then I would love to hear from our other members here. Are you, and pardon me for not knowing this, but do you have a line of sight only to what's happening at Issaquah High School? What about the other ones who have a similar calendar that they work through to have cultural events incorporated and part of the strategies?
I work at the district
Okay.
office, so I create the cultural calendar for
Got
the
it.
whole district,
Awesome.
and then we give it to the 27th.
Okay, that's great to hear. Because I see an opportunity to piggyback off of that a little bit, because I mean, that's the population, is these students that go to these schools and they create these cultural groups that are an image of the rest of the community, because they exist there at the school already, right? Because they're sensitive to that. So I think there's an opportunity to piggyback to already work that's happening. What do you two think about this, and what's going on at your school that we can incorporate into this?
Yeah, so there's like a lot of diversity in like religion clubs, and it's like ethnic based clubs at like not just Skyline, just like high schools in general. So at Skyline, there's the big ones are Indian Culture Club, I believe Korean Club, and then Black History, not just African American Club, I believe. Is that what it's
There's also a new Chinese club and then a newcomer club.
And there's a newcomers club, and in a Muslim club. There's another word in between club. I just can't remember off the top of my head. They all have these big events and fundraisers all the time. Like there's a Bollywood night that I went to last year. It's a lot of fun. And I remember going to a couple fundraisers that all these other clubs are present. So I think with some of these events, if like the city had some way of supporting them, getting Bollywood night, maybe getting it more on a larger scale, because it was a lot of fun. And it's a way of kind of like combining like the students that are mainly who are going to be there and more members from the community. And I combine that. And it's another way we can kind of tap into those community groups.
It's a great example that there might be cultural events that are already happening, that this grant program just helps to seed it to something bigger. That invites the community. So it's a great.
For example, the IST PTSA, so many of the schools do huge culture nights. And it'd be interesting to see if any of them want to combine their culture night with each other and do a more localized one, because funding is the hardest thing. Because as a district, we do not give money for food, and we don't have money for sport to give for those kind of things. But if someone else was coming in with funding to help promote community in the entire community, that would be ideal.
Yeah, all great ideas.
Yeah, I agree with Kunal. I think this whole process in general definitely makes it like more community based, which is I think a good step forward. At UW, there are also a lot of different like cultural clubs, but like within the Issaquah School District itself, I think it'd be a great idea to collaborate with schools and like nonprofits in specific communities, like us reaching out to whoever hasn't already been like accessing grants. And this was just an idea I had, but I don't know if like you've thought about it, or if it's like just like one grant for all, but like different grant sizes for like different projects and like project scopes. I think that would really help like small events and big events in general. And also, yeah, I think that was it. And also like once this is like put into place, like getting feedback from the community and like reaching out to them on what they think should be involved in like the grant process.
Absolutely, as we, again, first conversation, but as we build a framework, absolutely, getting feedback on it. I think the general premise, just so you all know, because it's a great question, this isn't a single grant that only one person gets. The thought of this model is having enough of a bucket of money that there are a dozen grants that are going out, throughout the year. Is it a once a year, right? Back to Dale's question, what's the cadence of this? Obviously with any kind of event, there's a lot of pre-planning that needs to be done, right? So this isn't hey, we want to hold an event next week. We need some money. So, but yeah, it's not a Hunger Games situation where everyone's just going for one grant.
That's a reference.
Sorry. Terrible reference.
I just had a quick question. I'm not sure if I missed this before I was here, but is there any like way that like, you guys have thought about like how you're gonna allocate the money or like to the grant, sorry, and like how you're gonna prioritize who gets it? Like, for example, it's like gonna be a big event where there's a lot of people there versus a new event that has kind of a new theme and applies to like a different group of people. How are you gonna prioritize and like manage? that?
Awesome. The criteria, evaluation criteria has not been figured out, but that would be a really key part. And Amy, I think as she brought it up, the Arts Commission has done a great job. So has the Human Services Commission, where there are some very key criteria and lenses that help that evaluation process. We would need to do absolutely the same thing with this.
And I really like some of the questions that already, or the potential parameters around like, how will this be educational? How will this be inclusive? Like that's not quite to your question, Kunal, but I think there's probably, of course, I would imagine there are some questions around like size and impact, but I think also, I think there's the opportunity to define the parameters. Like we don't have strong opinions yet.
And most likely year to year, it's going to change a little bit as we
Sure.
learn. Because you've had years to create yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is only the first
Always
year.
evolve.
It's
Yeah,
not,
the
it's not
first-
perfect.
Yeah,
you're
the
right.
first year we may not have as many people applying for the grants, but the next year, there's gonna be more and more as they figure it out. And then it's gonna be hard because some people who are used to money are not gonna get as much, but it's also for equitable access, right? Because you're gonna encourage it and the idea is
Yeah,
You
exactly.
don't want to, fund like
just the same thing.
just the same thing over and over again, or just the same groups over and over again.
Right, there's a community capacity element to this grant program that I think is an opportunity too, that, right, again, it's not just the groups that are in the know, as you all certainly talked about, but it's how do we come alongside, assist with an application, hey, here's a group that wants to do something, but we don't know what to do. Well, great, let us help you through the application process. So it's not just the large events. It's not, right, it's criteria that wouldn't just be volume based. Doesn't feel like the right approach.
Yeah. I had a couple of quick comments. I think it was brought up somewhere about the idea of something that's recurring is a good way to bring people back, and that way it's not sort of a one-off event that may or may not resonate. So one thing that maybe comes to mind here is what if we have seasonal events that are, once per season? That is an umbrella for multiple things that could happen. Maybe smaller cultural events that don't quite have the scale to be their own event, but could be under, say, the spring events or the summer events. And then, of course, you could still have Bollywood Night or whatever other larger events that would bring masses.
Okay.
That's one. And another is, given that we have so many amazing trails up here, what if we have something like a once a month fun walk / run that happens every first Saturday or something that brings, I can see you doing like marathons on those days, but we'll limit it to like 1 to 5K, so it's inclusive. We can leave people like way out, but as a way to bring community, it's relatively lightweight, doesn't require a whole lot of organization. And then we hit different trails in Issaquah each month.
That's a great idea. And again, we would want to be open to those community ideas and fostering sort of applications that, we wouldn't want to be too prescriptive. I mean, hey, here's our indoor public spaces that are available. Here's our parks and trails that are available. We want it to be open to creativity.
I think in that way, we really look at what culture is, right? Because culture is not just anyway. But part of culture, for example, one of the things I do for our culture, for my kids' culture night, is games of the world. Because my husband and our family are huge geek, the whole game geek and geeks. And so we have like a mahjong table and a loteria. Husband loves D&D, which is very American, this culture. And then we have chess. And so one of the things I love walking by by Rite Aid and seeing the store that has the dragons or something. They play Dungeons and Dragons. But But having like an event, maybe at the community center with many tables and we come and play games or meet other people playing games, but it's also culturally diverse,
Right.
learning about cultures. And then
World games or.
Yeah, just-
Board games.
board games, but at that place, had a poster saying, did you know that this is from this culture? Because some people don't know that it's from their culture, or maybe some people have cultural games that other people don't know. Bring your games, sit at the table, play with
It's
people
fantastic.
and invite them to it. So, and I think that's the reason I bring that up is we want to make sure that we're not, and that's something that I try to do with my work is it's not just we're having a celebration about Chinese culture, Indian culture, but we're trying to also bring all the people together and saying it's within our community. Look how much diversity we have, but we're still all one, right? So it's not just always doing cultural events from India, but doing a community event that is already intrinsically
Right.
culturally diverse, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that would be really helpful to bring unity and community rather than splitting us apart.
Yes.
Shawnee, do you still have your hand up for a comment question?
Yes, so my question is, do we have any idea how our neighboring cities are doing this? Similar events? Do they have a grant process and are there any learnings or anything that we have from them?
Great question. I think that'll be part of our research. This is not something that's universal amongst all cities. Cities take different stances. I know this jurisdiction I came from, I was 10 years a director in Kent. We were striving to do something very similar. So there are models out there. There's examples.
City of Bellevue has gone through an extensive process in the last couple of years, and they actually have a new grant program where it's actually a lot like your idea, where it isn't to one single cultural event, but they ask for events where they're combining culture together and sharing. So the whole point of the grant program is that there's some commonality or even, difference that they're sharing in their events. But they went through over a year process to create a program with lots of community engagement. So I think that's a really good model that we can learn from. Yeah.
So Shawnee, there's some examples out there. It'll be part of our work.
And
we're right at time. I'm sorry, Shawnee, go ahead. I'm going to close this out.
no, it's okay. I can circle back.
Well, Jeff and Amy, did you get enough arsenal from our team here to continue the discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Really, really good.
And as I understand it, you're going to loop back to us once you meet with the other commissions and boards, and I'd love to hear what you find out from them too.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. Great first conversation. We appreciate it. More to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doyle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move us along here. I know this is an important topic for us. Amy, Jeff, thank you for being here. Dale, board recruitment, can we move on to that?
Yeah, we can. So we, as happens every year, we are in the midst of our recruitment for our board. Excuse me, because of the age of our board, we're at a quite a significant moment where all of a sudden people that have been here for a while are, if they have not already, needed to indicate a desire to continue. We have a lot of terms that are coming up, and so we have a lot of open positions. Thank you to the folks that have already reapplied for their positions. I think we currently have 13 applicants for the equity board, and so we're going to start interviewing those folks here, hopefully in the next week, so that we can have a recommendation to the mayor by the end of the month. And so my hope for this time was to take any questions that people might have, but I also need to find someone to interview. We need 2 board members to interview to support with the interview process. And there are some people at this table who are not able to interview because they are applying for roles. So you're out. You can interview.
I can.
Yes.
Even though you're not in our city.
I know, even though he's not.
Yeah, that
Shawnee is applying also for her position, so she can't interview. So that leaves only a few of us, plus the folks that are not here this evening.
No, that's fine.
Yes, but I don't want to automatically default them. So you don't have to commit on the record tonight in front of me, but I will need to find 2 folks who can commit.
So as I understand it, Lorna and Karthik and I are the ones that.
And Priti
Pretty.
and Leslie.
Okay. And you don't need the same person in at the table with you, so.
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. If we wanted to split them in half, we could do that. That would be fine.
Okay.
So
And they're 15 minutes interviews online.
15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. So you review the application and then interview the person for 15 to 20 minutes with me. I will be in all the interviews. Don't worry. You won't be running solo. And then we will confer and offer positions. So.
Well, here's me just throwing out an idea. If you have, because you have to get on their calendars too. And I have no doubt that once you get them on a calendar, we can split that with the people that are available, just 15 minutes, right? We can't do all of them, but we can be there to support you. If you just need one person, maybe even. Was it just one person each time with you?
It was 2.
2, that's right.
But if it's only one, it's okay.
Okay.
Sort of like, we need to have at least one board member there.
Sure.
But
Okay. Does that sound good? If she gets the
I get
availability of the candidates, and then you tell us what that looks like as far as the calendar, and we'll work to get those spots filled.
What's the range during which you're gonna be doing these interviews?
Timeframe.
the month of March. I know that means that actually no, spring break doesn't start till April, but it will be this month, over the course of this month.
If you can push it up. The 2, I'd appreciate it, but I will try.
If we need a little bit of extra time, if we need
Yes.
like into the first week of April, I think I can advocate for us to.
This
do
is
that.
literally like my tax season. the business time.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, let me see if I can advocate for us to get an extra week. I know that the hope is to have it go to council for approval on April 1st. If we need to send our recommendations on the mid-April meeting, that's totally fine. It is very unlikely that the council is going to contest any of the mayor's recommendations. So
Just a clarifying question. Did you say we had to reapply to be on the board?
only if you're at the end of your term.
Okay.
You are not. You're set. I would have reached out to you. You would have gotten an email from me saying, hello.
Let's start to get a little.
Yes, if you did not get an email from me, you're currently signed up again for another year.
If
Okay.
you go to the website, all our
Yes.
names on the website says when we expire.
Yes.
Term. When our term expires, so the first person I was like, oh.
only
my
have the
God,
rest of
when's
this year.
my term expire? I didn't pay attention, so you can go and look and see because it's on the website. That's
And
the
it's-
best, easiest way.
And it's a little funky. So for instance, Shawnee filled a seat that was going to expire this year, but filled it last year. So unfortunately, she had to reapply for the seat, even though she didn't serve a full term.
Right.
Our 2 youth members have 2-year terms. So that's a whole different, everyone else has a 4-year term, but you're on that youthful, quick cycle. But so I think we'll have one funky seat. This year, we're going to be recruiting for someone to fill Christina's vacant seat. And her term technically expires next year. So we'll talk to all of our applicants about that. Just, I think some learning for me is to be clearer with folks during the application process about if you're filling a seat midterm, just knowing that you'll reapply. But Ray, if I saw a lot of nods, if that feels like a good approach to folks, I can move forward with I'll read applications.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're filled out and then reach out to folks, start scheduling.
Yes.
What I will likely do is send everyone everyone who's available to interview or not, who's eligible to interview. I'll send you first some availability before I actually send it to them. I think it'll be easier that way.
Oh, that way. Okay.
Is the date to apply very fixed that it's closed?
It is closed. If there's someone that desperately wants to apply or and they can get me an application done by the end of the week, this week, I can definitely make an exception and send them like we had to with the person you referred.
Lucia?
Yeah,
Oh, she had that technical issue? Okay.
Yes, we'll send a Word document, but just let me know as we walk out tonight. We'll get that done.
Okay.
Other questions?
Questions on that? Shawnee, you good? All right. we have-
Yes, an outsider and an insider at the same time, I approve.
Good.
Perfect.
All right, I will move us on to other business because I really want to touch on this before we close this evening. And I want to incorporate, oh, you have to head out.
I'm just curious, do you know how long this section's gonna be?
It's probably going to take the next 10 minutes. So if you need to
Okay.
go, that's fine. Okay, I'll try to get us moving along. I asked to put 7A on there, navigating the national climate, and I think we have an example of one that Kelly took some time to catch Priti and I up as a follow-up to the meeting that with the mayor participated in last month, and it was around conversations and diversity, equity, and inclusion and vocabulary and how that's starting to change, and it's trying to trickle down from a national conversation to a local conversation. And we just wanted to bring this up and run it by you. And I think this is going to be a great connection to what I had as a closing thought. But can I pass it off to you to kind of elaborate?
Yeah, I had contacted them about when the mayor spoke last meeting at the very end, very briefly said that it was very possible we were going to remove the words DEI and that still we would keep the work, but the vocabulary would change. At the time, I was like, oh, that's relief for me. That's good. And then maybe 2 days later, pondering it, I'm like, no, this is bothersome to me that we are going to change our vocabulary. I just saw the most current list is 68 words you're not supposed to use in a grant. And, and they're like, I've got them with me if you want to hear.
Emails.
Yes, gender, you name it. Anything that we say on a regular basis is now not allowed in a grant. It's
Federal
68.
grant.
A federal grant, yes. However, and so we all know this and it's all scary stuff. I realize that this is money and that different organizations are going to handle it differently. The state superintendent has said, we're going to stay the course. UW is rewriting, right? So it's different strategies out there. I'm just going to voice my thought and then everybody else can give their thought. But my thought is, this isn't going to end. This is just step one. And we're going to have to be asked to do something again that's going to feel uncomfortable, and we'll give that up. And then we'll give something else up, and then we'll give something else up. And we're in a hole. And so I know it's pretty easy for me to be pragmatic. I mean, not principled, since I don't even have a job, right? Although I have Social Security that could be lost. But so it's easier for me to just blurt on about how I think we use the vocabulary. Now, maybe it can be improved, right? Some of the words don't, I would always say that some of the words create confusion. But so that's my 2 cents about it, because it made me really uncomfortable after I thought about it.
Well, the timing of this is great because here we are talking about grants and
Yes.
and the way we articulate the narrative behind that grant is we're going to be restricted on what we can put on there.
No, it's not a federal grant.
It's not a federal grant.
Right.
Okay.
So, and I shared with Priti and Ray, and I'll share with this group, the current plan is to stay the course. We're continuing to implement the glossary that this board approved. In fact, literally calling it an equity and inclusion glossary. We're continuing with our equity impact assessment. There's not currently any plan to change. I think the invitation for this other business topic is and you're not currently being asked to advise on what the city should do. So I'll say that too.
Yes.
But a chance to talk about, if and when there is a tough moment, what would you like to advise the administration on it? Sort of starting that conversation. Not that the administration isn't looking for guidance right now. We don't know where the 27 point something million dollars of our federal grant money may or may not end up. That we're very well aware of that. But it's not causing the city to change anything about what it's doing right now. So.
Thoughts from anybody, concerns you want to share? It's just good to have this on our radar and to not let it slide.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I do have a thought. Sorry, yeah, I'm curious. Thank you for bringing that up. And it is scary and requires a good dose of vulnerability to work with.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if we could write down a few of these things that we think would be brought under question. Just anticipating, right? Not necessarily it's gonna happen, but things that we might want to be prepared for, that we might expect in the next year or so. So we can start to think about it beforehand, so we're not forced to make a decision without enough intentionality. Would that be helpful as a group of people, as the board to do that?
Yeah, and then where do we take that? Because do we have to filter everything through Mayor Polly before it gets to the city council? Because I think they're talking about this too, right? So I think what Karthik is saying is we all agree that something should be shared. We should agree upon it and make the mayor aware. And if she needs us to present it to the council members, we'd be happy to, because it's important to us. That's why I think we were created, to be honest with you, is to have a pulse on these things. And now here it is at our front door.
Yep.
Just don't want to.
I'm wondering if some of us would be more powerful in going to city council meetings and attending there, or getting some friends, family, whatever, to go to those meetings, to be a presence. So when the city council is forced to have a discussion where people who are not in support of, because I very much trust our city council and our mayor to keep up this work. And I think sometimes they need people's support to show the reason why, who they're representing. And I think we would be more powerful in that sense, because I don't want to make their work harder, because I do trust that they are trying very hard. I know that in my work, every day is a battle, or feels like it, because every day something comes out that might be a problem for families in our community. And that's my job, to make sure that they have access to education. And so I don't want to, and it's hard sometimes when you feel like you have to battle people in your community when you're already trying to do the work to support families in your community. You're like, I am doing so much, please help me. But so I just want to make sure how we show up is of support to our mayor, who I know is trying to help our community, and how we show up is not that's me personally, is always going to be saying, I know, I see your work and that how hard you're trying, and I want to make sure that when you need me, I'm there to help elevate your work.
So I love that idea. So if we were to walk in, we can't walk into a city council member meeting and say, on behalf of the equity board, we would be walking in as citizens of Issaquah. So we'd have to delineate that, because something we state needs to be reviewed by the mayor.
Ray knows this this line. He's learned it well for the course of the last 6 months. Yeah, you would be attending as a community member.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that you understood that too,
Yes,
right?
and that's what my suggestion was. We show up as community members. We encourage other community members in the community to show up who are like-minded, because every day I find out I have different allies. And that's great, because that makes me happy to know that other people see me, are like me. And so what we're looking for is allies within the community, and we want to help the mayor and the city council know, hey, there are allies. Look, they're coming. They're there for you to make the best decisions for us.
Any regular meeting, you can make public comment. Yeah. It's similar to what you experienced with the school board. You can let our clerk know ahead of time. You can sign up on the website ahead of time, or you can show up that day and sign in to make public comment.
Is it you get a minute and they buzz you out like they did at the school board?
I think it's 3 minutes. I promise you'll be recorded. But it's usually three minutes, I think, is usually the length of time. So it's a little bit longer. But every single person that signs up gets that 3 minutes. So
I joke with her because I was at a school board meeting and you only get 60 seconds and they buzz you out. You're done. So good. That's good to know. Okay, so that's an opportunity for us to get more engaged. Just come in as a regular community member and not say, oh, on behalf of the equity board.
Yeah.
But the question that I have to throw out, if anybody has been at those meetings, have there been citizens who had been combative about this stuff and said,
I'm only familiar with.
Not up to this point.
okay,
I would say if you look back, not recommending anyone go and watch the public comment on all the city council meetings. I actually think, that we experienced, and I mean, we talked about this as an equity board, I think last month or the month before, we have had people, we've had like neo-Nazi, what is it called when you Zoom bomb? Is that a
Yes,
thing?
yes.
Zoom bombers attend our council meeting. But that was last spring or like not recently. Since November, we haven't had any. I'm trying to think of the public comment most recently. It's mostly been on public safety related to Rainier Trail stuff. But nothing post, nothing in the current federal administration. No one's been showing up to say one thing or the other. So definitely the opportunity there. Great.
any other comments?
I'm gonna have to.
No, you're good.
Thanks for hanging out for this. Any other comments on that? I know there's just a lot of moving parts with this topic.
And then Ray, I know I had emailed with these two about potentially other business items.
Yes,
You want to invite any other business items before we're.
any other business items?
So I believe in the December meeting, we were talking about the SEL curriculum at high school, middle schools, and elementary schools in the Issaquah School District. And me and Varnica kind of touched on how they are kind of ineffective. They don't really grasp attention.
And you want to talk more about them right now?
Yeah, and we kind of want to like just discuss like kind of like what we want to do, because we don't know much about navigating this, and we just kind of want some advice on how to go about and try to make some changes to this.
Is anyone opposed to adding a quick other business item to give these two some advice?
No.
Okay. Go for it.
So at least my current idea was that at the next Issaquah Youth Advisory Board, me and Varnica could talk at the start to all the around 40 board members, Issaquah Youth Advisory Board members, and maybe create like some kind of task force of at least around 5 to 10 people. And then maybe we'd get on a call and kind of talk about the different problems that everyone from a variety of different schools, what they experience and what they could think could solve this. And then from there, once we can have a list of the problems, we could create some ideas for a solution, and then either create a letter or go in person to the Issaquah School District Board. So that's just kind of what I had off the top of my head.
Yeah, SEL lessons are like social and emotional learning lessons. And I think throughout middle school and high school, they aren't really effective students, so just trying to get them over with. So we wanted to, implement like how we could take things like the now equity and inclusion glossary and like include equitable things within these lessons and push it forward to the district on how we can make them, more equity-based and also more engaging towards students and like truly teach them more about what they can do and things still related to SEL. But that was the idea. We want to bring it to YAP since there's so many youth members there that are all part of the Issaquah School District. And we just had like a base idea, but we wanted to see like what more we could do with it and how we would kind of approach this in the first place.
You can, yeah.
I think your idea is a great one. Many people in the school district administration are very aware of the limitation of SEL, and part of it is how it's done. And part of it is some parts of the contract and how it can be done. So working on that is a hardship. I think the youth board coming up and saying that this is a problem and coming up with a solution and offering to help is always the best idea, because you never, for me, I always believe that you always want to come in this space solution oriented with ideas and proposals. At the same time, it is a school district, so you cannot create too many ideas on your own without collaborating with them. So I think ideas is great. I personally believe part of the problem is we're trying to do something very hard as adults, because I literally just spoke to someone about how I'm struggling a little bit in social media communicating because I am no longer relevant. I've lost my the way I would communicate, speak, work with some children or even adults in my community has changed.
Yeah.
And I never thought that I would be in that area, but
Yeah.
I am. And so I need to up my game in how I communicate and how I work with people that I'm trying to connect.
Yep.
And I think part of the SEL is we know what needs to be taught, but in the presentation, there are struggles because great ideas have come off it, asked by students, and yet when it's presented, the kids are not listening.
Yeah.
So if you're coming up with an idea of, hey, we even have a group of people who will work with you, great idea.
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't speak for the school district in this, but I think that is a great way to start in getting student voice to create solutions for social emotional learning that's most impactful students. I would also recommend that you do both. And when you do both, you have multiple people in the youth advisory board send emails separately. So it's not one, and with their own individual voice, because sometimes emails are sent with one generic voice and it's very, again, authenticity is key, right? So you're going to say, this is what I noticed in my school, name the school, what's the problem, and here's what I think is an idea.
Yeah.
So gathering that, and then all of those people sending an email and go and ask for time. And I don't know how much time, but maybe you split it up. Exactly, but I'm just saying, if like you break it up and say 10 people go one board meeting, 10 people go. Because part of it is also persistence, right? To recognize that this is an ongoing problem rather than a one-time deal.
Yeah.
Right, so to show that we are being, what's the word I'm looking for? We are
To,
heart in the game.
yeah,
You know,
concerted
we are-
ongoing effort.
Yeah, there's an ongoing effort and plan. And so go to at least 2 or 3 meetings, or maybe you go to the first one and they're like, yep, love you, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or maybe it'll take a few more because it's also a board that's working on many things and it takes time. It's literally like, think of a cruise ship, turning around the cruise ship, I heard is very hard.
Yep.
Same thing. So how do we help them? How do you give enough information to support them? Because I don't think your voice, they very much care about student voice, so how do we help them help the system?
And I was exaggerating, it's 3 minutes, sorry.
It just felt like a minute.
But did we answer your question?
Yeah,
You're
I
looking
did.
for feedback from us, but I didn't know if there was specific actions that you wanted the board to be present at a meeting, like you were talking about the youth meeting that you were talking about, is that something that we can
I think
support
me
you?
and Barnica can handle, like, we can help, we can lead the youth.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're.
Love that.
we're good at
Yeah.
that. We just wanted help like navigating what to do.
Yeah.
On the path.
Okay.
Your plan sounds really good. I agree. I think one thing, I also agree with Lorna's idea of there's gonna need to be some level of authenticity from each of the advocates that you have. You could potentially provide a little bit of a template to make it a little bit easier, like, but they're gonna need to fill in those blanks, you know,
Yeah.
in terms of what they've observed, why they find it to be a problem, and what they would recommend as an idea or solution. And then let us know, you know, off the record, I think, you know, all of us are here to support as you're navigating this, you know, so Ray has spoken at the school board. You know, I'm a former teacher, Lorna works for the district, Kelly has an education background, like we
Tried many times.
yes, we all have insights into how schools and districts function. And so as you're getting further along and you've built up, you know, a group of youth that's ready to sort of advocate, let us know. And then I don't know enough about the SEL program. I don't know if it's like, here's the canned curriculum, or if it's, these are the objectives and you get to plan within it, but.
That, we do have objectives and we
Okay.
do have to follow parameters.
Of
And
course.
just so you know, right now it's under attack.
Great.
As with everything.
As is
So I'm
everything.
like, how is SEL, social emotional learning, a bad thing? But
Oh,
it
you know,
is
Lorna.
also under attack right now.
Yeah.
And but we have support from our
For different
state.
reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we have support from our state, and so we will continue, but implementing it, it's not a
Absolutely.
core curriculum, so it's different, right? And so how do we implement it with
Yeah.
fidelity? Because we're
Yeah.
implementing it even,
Yep.
but sometimes even as a teacher, things don't hit their mark and you have to work on.
Don't
How
I
to-
know it? Yeah. And so my question is more around like as you're because if it's a
It's not a
canned,
canned curriculum, there's standards.
Yeah,
That
so-
have to be met, and so.
so I'd look at those. And I'm happy to also look at those with you and for some of the things that some of the ideas that you might be recommending. I think it's going to be important to look at those standards and objectives and see the way that your recommendations fit within the framework that exists.
I would think that whatever administrator is in charge of that would be thrilled to have 2 students come and talk to them.
Yeah,
You know,
or
so-
10.
I have no idea who it is, but somebody's in charge. One part of their job is SEL curriculum.
I think there's a lot of good information in SEL. We're just trying to see how we can potentially like improve it in a
Yeah.
way to make it like more feasible for students and like more informative as well. But I think like that's definitely a great idea. If we go to the youth board and kind of tell everyone to share their personal experiences.
Yeah.
I've definitely done stuff like that with the board before, for,
Yeah.
what's it called, land acknowledgements.
Yep.
How to do stuff like that.
Yep.
Also make sure you're talking about the lessons that work and the lessons
Yes.
that don't work.
Yeah.
So give them examples of this was good, this didn't work.
Yep.
And why?
Yep.
Because the whole thing is to reflect and learn from what happened.
Yep. And to keep the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one.
What's the thing? Last thing is be aware of the different grade level strands, right? So things been happening in middle school versus high school. So in your communication, if they say I'm from Pacific Cascade or Issaquah Middle, they'll figure that out. But also that's slightly different because SEL given in middle school will look differently than SEL in high school.
Yep.
And high school it's given during nest, well, depending on the school. And those times, sometimes it's not just the teacher or the lesson.
The time of day.
No, kids sometimes don't want to do that. They have other plans because their life is complex, right? And they
Yeah.
want to do other things. And so how do we get it to be engaging
Yeah.
with the kids on the
So what I was thinking was that, so members of the youth board and Veronica and I, we've only experienced SEL from like a student's perspective. We don't really know as much as what's going on behind the scenes, which is a good idea to look at the objectives, but maybe like how rigid the objectives are, how flexible are they with changing those? And I think maybe it's a good idea to talk to the administrator first before we send any emails or go to any board meetings to kind of find.
You can talk to the board easily and then you can see the administrator is like, you would think that that would be step 2. But I think if you start with talking to the board, you can answer that.
Yep.
You should do what you guys believe is right first. However, again, it is very powerful to go get information also, right?
Yep.
That's good. Thank you all for your help.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah,
doing
you
that.
guys updated.
That'd be wonderful.
Awesome. Right.
I think we need to close us out here. I just wanted to share something with you, and I think I'm so proud of this conversations that we're having here. You know, it keeps it at the forefront. All these topics that were touched on today just warms my heart, because what happened to me this week, I was supposed to fly to Washington, DC for a conference that CMS was hosting, and just 2 days ago, they canceled it.
CMS.
Center for Medicare and Medicaid.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, it was around a payer, a provider collaborative, and they said, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to cancel this. So
Is it because the funding going to be lost or?
yes, part of it too, but leadership changes too. You know, they report up to Kennedy now, so that's the big they're part of the HHS umbrella. CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, reports up to HHS, and this was about a collaborative between an insurance companies, and healthcare systems, and it was a huge event, but it got canceled. So all these people are upset; they're just in an uproar. So what the thought that I wanted to close this out with is now is not the time to be taking your pedal off this situation. And what we're doing here is exactly that. We're keeping the accelerator on in these topics and sharing it with our leaders and sharing it with the people around us. Because I think there's an opportunity to take this and keep it at the forefront, not let it slide, right? And however we do that, like exactly how you're doing it here with the conversations that you're having, and keeping a grant funding for events that are socially sensitive are things that we can keep the eye around equity within our forefront. So let's just start with that. So thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you for your guidance, Dale, on all this stuff.
Absolutely.
All right.
Great.
Okay. Any other, am I allowed to ask that?
Yeah, you are.
Any follow-up to that comment or anything else you want to share? We have about 5 minutes before we close this out. Shawnee, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Oh,
Oh,
muted.
you're muted.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say thank you in case I don't get elected again, but I wanted to say this has been an incredible sort of learning experience, getting to understand the, how DEI works at the local community level and city level. So, and just working with this group has been very empowering. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. Other comments? Okay. The next equity board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 2, and it is 7:46 p.m. I am going to close out our meeting. Thank you, everybody. Good seeing you today.
Stop recording. Before you all run away,